A golden city rises on the plain, and a colossal statue demands that the whole world bow down. A furnace blazes like the mouth of pride, and then comes a chilling reversal. The one who once commanded nations suddenly loses his mind like an animal driven out of the palace to learn a lesson no army could ever teach. But that is not the end, for God can break the pride of a king, and he can also restore a man when that man finally lifts his eyes to heaven.
Please follow the story of Nebuchadnezzar.
Night in Babylon was unlike any night in any other land. That city was not built only with fired bricks. It was built with ambition. Its walls were thick. Its gates rose high like a challenge. And at the top of that palace stood a king who had grown used to seeing power as something that belonged to him by nature. He had passed through battlefields as if walking through a doorway. He had pulled kings down, placed nations beneath his feet, and piled spoils into mountains. When Jerusalem was besieged, many were taken away, forced laborers, servants, officials, wise men for Babylon's court. Among the exiles were young men from Judah's nobility, eyes still bright, backs still straight, yet their futures locked behind foreign gates. One of them was Daniel. Babylon did not only take land, it wanted to take minds. They changed names, taught language, taught culture, taught people how to bow before strange idols. But there are things that do not change owners, even when a name is changed. And the most frightening thing for a king like Nebuchadnezzar was not a rebel holding a sword, but a young man quietly keeping his heart from belonging to him. But this story does not begin with war. It begins with a night when power could not help the king sleep. That night, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed. Not an ordinary dream, heavy like an omen, vivid like reality. He saw a great statue standing towering and immense, a head of gold chest and arms of silver belly and thighs of bronze legs of iron and feet of yarn and eclatum. Then a stone cut out not by human hands struck the statue on its feet. The statue collapsed, shattered into dust, and the wind blew it away like chaff. But the stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. The king jolted awake, cold sweat on his neck. What frightened him was not simply the image of the statue, but the feeling of being seen through, as if a power greater than the power he held had placed a message inside his sleep. He summoned the magicians, the sorcerers, the astrologers. They lined up before the throne incense and charms hanging in the air like mist. But Nebuchadnezzar no longer wanted pleasant words. He looked straight at them and spoke a sentence that made the whole room go cold.
Tell me the dream I had and its meaning.
They froze because everyone understood if the king told them the dream, they could invent an interpretation. But if the king did not tell it, they would be exposed. They stumbled, begged the king to speak first.
If you cannot tell me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb.
In the great hall, the air thickened. Men who had lived by words suddenly had none. And in that very moment, Babylon, the most confident empire on earth, was placed in a weak position before something invisible. Word of this reached Daniel. When the decree went out to kill the wise men, Daniel did not scream or panic. He asked for time. Daniel had no charms and no sorcery. Daniel had only one thing Babylon did not understand. He believed there is a God who reveals mysteries. That night, he returned to his friends and knelt down. In a hidden corner of the empire, 4 young exiles pleaded for the mercy of God, like men clinging to a thin rope above a deep abyss. That night, what the magicians could not find in their books was given to a man who had no weapon but reverence. The mystery was revealed. Daniel rose, breathing as if he had just walked through a storm. The next morning, Daniel was brought before the king. The hall was still cold. Officials held their breath. Nebuchadnezzar looked at the young man and asked as if testing the edge of a sword.
Can you tell me the dream I saw and interpret it?
Daniel bowed his head, but not his heart. He answered,
There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen.
Daniel 2:28. Then Daniel spoke the dream detail by detail, as if reading straight from the king's own memory. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widened, not with delight, but with shock. Daniel began to interpret.
You, O king, are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory.
You are the head of gold.
Daniel 2:3-7-3-8.
Those words were honey to a man already convinced he was the center of everything. But Daniel did not stop at praise. He spoke of the parts that followed kingdoms that would rise after him, and finally the stone not cut by human hands, a dominion not built by men, crushing every human power. Nebuchadnezzar sat motionless, exalted, and warned in the same breath. And here is where many think the story will turn, that the king will become humble at once. But pride rarely dies from a single warning. It often survives and changes its shape. Not long after, on the plain of Dura, a golden statue was raised. Not only a head of gold, but all of it gold, like a stubborn declaration. He commanded that when the music sounded, everyone must fall down and worship. Whoever refused would be thrown into a blazing furnace. The decree fell like a net over the whole empire. People bowed not only from belief, but from fear, and fear is one of the fastest things in the world to spread. But in the sea of bowed bodies, 3 men remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's friends. Their names had been changed, but their faith had not been reassigned. Officials reported them, and the king ordered them brought in. Nebuchadnezzar stared at them, forcing the fair voice of power.
If you do not worship, you will be thrown into the furnace. And what god will deliver you out of my hand?
The 3 looked at the king not arrogantly, but with a calmness that made even the furnace seem small. They said short and firm, like a hammer striking stone,
Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not worship the golden image.
Daniel 3:17-18. Nebuchadnezzar's face changed. Pride, when challenged, reacts like fire meeting oil. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter. The flames roared like a wild beast. His strongest soldiers tied the 3 men and hurled them in, and the heat killed the soldiers who threw them. Then the king jumped to his feet. He stared into the fire without blinking. He stammered.
Did we not throw 3 men into the fire? I see 4 men walking around in the fire, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods.
The fire did not consume them. Their ropes burned, but their bodies remained. They stepped out clothes not scorched, no smell of smoke on them. Before the whole court, Nebuchadnezzar had to acknowledge there was a power greater than his furnace. But notice this: Nebuchadnezzar could praise God for a moment and still keep his own throne in his heart. Then Nebuchadnezzar dreamed again. This time he saw a great tree, tall to the heavens, feeding all living creatures. But a messenger from heaven came down and commanded that the tree be cut down, leaving only the stump bound with iron and bronze. And the decree declared that the mind of a man would be changed into the mind of an animal, living like a beast in the field for a set period of time. Nebuchadnezzar called Daniel. This time Daniel fell silent for a long while, not because he did not know, but because he did, and it grieved him. Some interpretations feel like placing a sword into the hands of someone you do not want to wound. Daniel spoke plainly: the tree was the king, and the cutting down was a warning against pride. He urged the king to stop doing evil, to act with justice, to show mercy to the poor. Perhaps the disaster could be delayed. Nebuchadnezzar listened, and then did what people often do after being warned. He let time pass, assuming that it hasn't happened means it won't happen. 12 months later, the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace. Babylon lay beneath him like a sea of red brick temple gates, towers, glittering canals. And in that intoxicated moment, he spoke a sentence that stamped his fate.
Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power, for the glory of my majesty?
Before the words finished leaving his mouth, a voice from heaven answered like lightning striking pride. The kingdom would depart from him. His reason would vanish. He would be driven away from people, live with the beasts of the field, eat grass like an ox, until he recognized the Most High. And immediately, what no army could ever do happened. Nebuchadnezzar was dragged out of the palace like a madman. His hair grew long and tangled like feathers, his nails like claws. He wandered in the fields, eyes empty, mouth chewing grass. Night dew soaked him, noon sun scorched him. He had once commanded others to kneel, now he crawled on the ground. He had once lived among incense, now he lived among mud and weeds. This was not merely physical punishment. It was a ruthless lesson When a human being exalts himself as a god, he will lose even his humanity. God did not need to take his life to show him he was not God. Then one day, after the appointed time had passed, a small moment came almost unnoticed. No banquet, no music, no cheering, only an old man, weathered by wind and dew, standing in an open field. He lifted his eyes to heaven, and in that instant clarity returned like light.
I lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned, and I praised and honored him who lives for his dominion is an everlasting dominion.
Daniel 4:34. Lifted my eyes to heaven sounds simple, but it is the death of pride. Pride keeps its eyes down to see everyone else as lower. Humility begins when a person finally looks up and admits there is one above. Nebuchadnezzar was restored. Authority returned to him, but it was no longer the kind of power that worships itself. He had tasted what every empire must eventually taste. A human being does not own glory. A human being is only entrusted with stewardship for a season, and that season belongs to God. He ended the account of his life with a confession.
Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and honor the King of heaven.
Daniel 4:37. And the most unforgettable part is not how strong Nebuchadnezzar was, but that God had mercy enough to bring him down, and mercy enough to raise him up again when he finally accepted the truth. Maybe in your life, the golden statue is not on the plain of Dura. Maybe it sits in the mind. And sometimes God does not topple us with a loud catastrophe, but with a season of dryness, a moment of helplessness, a stretch of time where we no longer trust our own voice. Not to destroy us, but to rescue us from an invisible prison named pride. Sometimes blessing comes in the form of breaking, so we learn to lift our eyes to heaven and find ourselves again in the gaze of the Most High.
If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Fidelia Bible Stories.
We truly spend a great deal of time writing and telling deep biblical stories like this, and your support is our greatest motivation to keep going.
Don't hesitate to leave the name of the Bible figure you want to hear next in the comments.